everyone, my name is Crystal Wijaya. Today I'm an executive in residence at Reforge, a Sequoia Scout and angel investor. I also advise a handful of startups on the side across Indonesia and the US. Today I'm super excited to be sharing with you data scaling for startups. So over the last 4.5 years, when I was at Gojek, I would receive the same set of questions. Should I hire a data engineer? Should I hire a data scientist? What kind of data scientist do I need? And at the core of all of these questions is the common mistake of viewing data as a team to hire or just a set of tools to implement instead of looking at data as a strategic lever for growth. Because the right answer to all of these questions is it depends. It's really hard to answer these questions without a well-understood and nuanced view of the business, its operations, and knowing that there isn't a single right answer that fits all organizations. It actually depends on the type of people you currently have, how much data you have, and how fundamental data is to driving your business's growth. But data can be a strategic lever for growth. You just need to figure it out and sequence it in the right ways. I noticed that many founders and early stage employees don't have the experience or just haven't had the opportunity to work with an organization that is building its data team from scratch. And so hopefully I can share a couple of the tips and tricks that I've seen across Gojek and many other startups about how data can be leveraged for growth. So what does it look like when an organization treats data as a set of tools or just a team? Let's talk about a couple of the symptoms here. One, the data team is buried under tickets of work. They don't have the breathing room to prioritize and optimize, and they're stuck on building dashboards, submitting analyses for questions that they don't really understand the context of. Second, you don't have any force multipliers. Instead of building off of previous streams of work and providing more value with relatively less work, the provided value stays the same, and there's no ability to scale those operations. And finally, you see data being measured as a resource and an output rather than the impact that it's providing. Instead, I see successful data-savvy organizations yielding much more different outputs. They have analyses that are treated as valuable insights rather than specific bragging rights. PMs are actually looking for broader understanding, and they know that not every answer is going to make them look great, but every answer should help them get closer to their objectives. Second, these data teams and product teams align on strategic initiatives. They don't think about all of the work that needs to be done on a minute level, but instead trust one another to align early and often. Third, PMs are brainstorming both problems and solutions with the data team instead of just coming to them with a hypothesis to validate. They partner instead of reaching out to one another as a resource. And finally, they're masters of compounding insights. You have previous learnings that are accessible and used, and therefore you don't waste precious data resourcing time. You don't beat a dead horse on analysis just because you don't know it's been looked at before and that you've already come across this analysis. And instead, there's a sense of achievement and progress that will guide people as they set out to achieve those objectives. But you really want to ask yourself first, before embarking on a data strategy roadmap for your company, is data science really necessary for your business? And more importantly, is it necessary now? Because there are a few sequential steps to using data science in an organization. And if you're trying to skip the fundamentals, you're probably going to run into some problems. So key questions to inform your data strategy and whether or not you need data science now are listed here. Everyone thinks that they need to have this highly scalable, mature data organization, but the reality is that most businesses don't actually have the necessary scale to build advanced ML-led capabilities that could meaningfully impact the business. The answer to questions like, when do I need a data scientist really starts with this objective reflection of your company's operations. And these questions oftentimes reveal some uncomfortable truths. Two uncomfortable truths that I often reveal with these types of questions. One, the company doesn't actually have enough data. And so advanced data infrastructure would actually be very unimpactful to the company's business operations. Even the most sophisticated data science team and infrastructure is going to fail to add value to a business that just isn't generating enough usable data. There aren't enough signups, not enough retained users, or actions in the product or behaviors in the product that allow meaningful data science solutions and relationships to exist, because you're still figuring out the business itself. And second uncomfortable truth that these questions often reveal is that the company doesn't even have the right foundations. It's an equally terrifying conclusion, which is that, your business operations are at scale, you do have a ton of data, but you're totally unprepared to leverage data as a strategic competitive advantage. You find out that months or even years of data haven't been tracked at all, or the data that is tracked is stuck in this third-party system that the data and the company doesn't even have ownership of that data. Or the business team has just been operating with suboptimal decision-making without data for so long that it's unlikely to change easily. The culture has already been ingrained in those foundations or lack thereof. And so where would a data scientist even start and how? The realization of this opportunity cost is really painful, and making up for it can take hours, if not weeks, of realigning metrics definitions, sourcing available data, backfilling data pipelines, and a huge realignment of the company's culture. But again, data can be a strategic lever for growth. If you're still searching for product market fit, building a huge data infrastructure that meets the needs of a post-product market fit organization will actually impede growth. And so what I would think through here is to first identify the business needs. Do we need to reach product market fit? Are we at product market fit and we actually need to scale? Second, build the necessary capabilities with an eye on unlocking that growth and building on top of it. For example, at Gojek, the first data scientist that I hired was tasked with building a fraud detection service before we even had the infrastructure in place to collect enough data. And that was a huge mistake. After a few unproductive weeks, we realized that a few simple business rules that we came up with in an hour or two would actually capture the majority of suspicious transactions. And many years later, those business rules are actually still responsible for preventing 40 to 60% of bad actors, even with this advanced data science team in place today. And stories like this are incredibly common. That shiny enterprise level data product actually prevents a lot of companies from figuring out and solving for the problems that they need to deliver today. So what is the process to figure this out? And what are the different stages of a business that will lead to data being used as a strategic lever? There are 3 stages for any company's data journey. One is when they are data informed, they're really operationally focused, they're pre-product market fit, or they're just unlocking and figuring out their business model. The second stage is when you are more data driven. Data is informing a lot of your feature development, your business operations, and the decisions that are being made. And then the third is when you're truly at scale and building data products across the organization, not just as consumer-facing features or products, but as internal scalability incentives and unlocking growth generators. And what all of this looks like is this map. Take your screenshots now, but we'll dive into a couple of these. We don't have time to get into the weeds, but I want to be really clear about these 4 horizontal pillars. There are 4 inputs to building data capabilities at each of those 3 stages. You want to first consider the needs of your business, what you need to achieve, and compare it to what you want to do in the future with what capabilities you have. And mature data organizations will work in conjunction by empowering and unlocking and building off of one another. The right strategy is to actually meet or match the needs of your business at the current stage with building the appropriate data capabilities for the business to scale into its next growth phase. So infrastructure unlocks analytics, which unlocks product. And the team is actually the one that is driving and balancing all of those capabilities and providing that scalability. So let's dive more deeply into stage one. At stage one, data-informed companies are focused on operations. They're building the business, they're understanding the market, they're figuring out their consumers, and they're iterating very quickly. And so as a result, data is set up to tactically fulfill that need with very limited infrastructure. And that prioritizes productivity and data visibility over sophistication. I would not conflate custom, high throughput data engineering infrastructure with faster or better decision-making capabilities. Instead, at this stage, I would focus on building the necessary data capabilities that will bring the company from pre to post product market fit with a very business-centric view and data foundation to iterate on. And what that kind of looks like in practice is something like this. You want to start out with building data dictionaries. And Gojek actually started out this way. A data dictionary is obviously a shared language document that helps describe how the business talks about their different metrics and what's available in the product systems. And 3 reasons for documentation here. One is you create shared language so that you start building that data culture in the organization. The second is you're able to accelerate the onboarding process for new hires as the company is growing. It unlocks resourcing and operations needs. And third, you're activating data-led decision-making. When people are debating whether or not they should, make this decision or that, they can instead say, hey, don't we have data on this? Like, let's just go take a look at what the information is telling us. And so starting out here is completely fine. And moving towards something that's more robust, again, is more about accessibility rather than beauty. Think Craigslist. You want something that people are incentivized to use. Just because it looks great doesn't mean it's very usable. And so I often think about the product Craigslist when I encourage people to try this product. And finally, look into Clickstream tracking. I've written a longer blog post on this, but many teams underestimate how long it takes to track in-product user journey flows effectively, especially for multi-platform mobile apps. But this data actually gives the organization visibility on what product experiences and business processes lead to towards retaining their users. So it's important to start this work early because the data actually becomes more valuable and valid the longer you have been tracking it. So moving from business level data to user behavioral data is a key part of driving from stage 1 to stage 2 growth. Finally, custom cohorts. While basic retention cohorts can be generated in third-party platforms like Google Analytics, you want to use cohorts to help determine your product market fit. Custom cohorts basically incorporate more nuanced data used to better understand your growth model across different acquisition channels like Facebook versus Google, understand the payback period, and whether or not you're able to scale without running out of money. And this really implies having an effective attribution strategy on your data models so that you know for users who signed up and users that churned or dropped off, where they came from, what transactions they've done, and what behaviors they did because you did that Clickstream event tracking in the slide before. When I think about resourcing teams at stage 1 data-informed organizations, I usually recommend 2 things. 1, do not hire dedicated data engineers too soon. Leverage existing back-end engineers or someone who's really interested in data organization to just partner with technical PMs or business strategy generalists or operations people to integrate those critical third-party data sources and start structuring the data that the overall organization knows they need in order to make better decisions. And you can do this every few sprints or every couple of months. And the second strategy is to actually adopt low-code tools. You can leverage off-the-shelf low-code tools like Zapier or even Google Apps Script to just very quickly automate data from your production databases into a Google Sheet. And that's completely fine. That unlocks the data observability and visualization of what the team needs to know for how the business is growing and to make better decisions on whether or not they were working on the right things that week. That covers stage one. Now, let's think more about stage two. Stage two companies are data-driven. They have much more robust data infrastructure. They're focused on letting data drive their product development cycles and feature implementation. And they're starting to do deeper dives into understanding consumer segments, use cases, or even markets. And so what does a stage two data-driven company need? Well, they're focused on scaling. They have a growing functional and product operations organization. They're refining their product offering, and they have an expanding set of users and markets. This usually starts by reorganizing teams or hiring product and feature-specific PMs, and even functional specialization, like splitting sales teams into SDRs, AEs, and AMs, and manager roles. But this increased capacity unlocks deeper accountability since these specific teams can now be responsible for a specific input metric. For example, for a B2B company, I would think through things like number of hand raisers, whether or not users are hitting feature walls, number of contacts added. And so you have team-specific metrics, and they're driving their growth tactics and strategies. You also want companies at this stage to leverage a data team for decision-making guidance, not just operational data retrieval and visibility. They're improving data-driven decision-making by creating some self-service access to information, and more importantly, they're providing deep, comprehensive insights that help answer why something is happening, not just what's happening. And these productionized data products help unlock new teams and operational capabilities that were previously hard to determine before. So at this stage, there are a couple of tools and capabilities that I would build out. First, data governance. As the company grows, you're going to want to make sure that the data stays with the company and isn't being misused or is too difficult for a team to understand. And creating a product that's very user-centric, the data team almost acts as its own startup. They're assessing who their consumers are. Maybe it's a product team PM, maybe it's a customer service agent, but they're defining what kind of data granularity they need access to and why, and how that access should be provided. Second, you want to start building out a customer data platform, commonly abbreviated the CDP. It's really important to start out user clustering, segmentation, and even feature engineering by taking stock of what data you're collecting on the consumer today and starting to aggregate and create new dimensional data sets or derived data sets based on their specific actions. And finally, where will all of this live? The data lake. And it doesn't need to get this complex. You can just start out here, where you have all of your production level data coming into the data lake. It will have your scalable data warehouse architecture, imported data from third-party services, and this layer of massaged data insights that help aggregate that data into one place so that analytics teams and customer service or PMs can just analyze that data themselves. In terms of hiring and resourcing, In the same way that we develop a growth model for the business, an effective data leader will then develop an understanding of the growth constraints that are preventing the data organization from delivering value. Most of us have been part of these ineffective organizations where you just hire the same set of people, or you hire more people who are very similar to who you already have. And that really just adds overhead, complexity, communication, too many nodes to communicate with, and there's minimal value add. And so the right key here at this stage is to actually hire specialists rather than generalists. The greatest leverage here is that you're inserting some strategic skill sets that give your teams new superpowers. The sequence of strategic hires that I see is typically product analysts, to statisticians, to data scientists, to economists, or even ML engineers. We'll spend the least amount of time talking about stage 3. Reason being, not every company needs to get here. So let's talk about who are the types of companies that need to be stage 3 data-led organizations. Well, data is actually a defensibility feature for the company. They have data network effects where for every data point they're collecting, the product itself actually gets better. They have strong capabilities around a platformized and scalable data warehouse. It comes at a large scale, but they're actually able to then provide business-generated recommendations. And these rule sets and SOPs are not really enough to maintain that defensible product experience. What's needed here is actually democratized data operations. In earlier stages, the data team would probably own this responsibility, but for stage 3 companies, the scale of the business is so much that the data team could actually become a bottleneck to this process. And so democratized data operations is essentially the process of democratizing the ability to ingest, clean, and make data available for analytics and production use. And so this is a really productized version of what we initially had as internal tools for the data team, or even experimentation platforms and automation for data scoring and data quality services. But it's important that it allows the PMs and business teams to actually develop data products on their own. And so why is this important? Because at stage 3, businesses are data-led and cannot actually operate without data products. Think about it in the same way of if Amazon were to lose all of their data products and ability to manage proprietary predictive models that power fulfillment, logistics routing, and SKUs, and their storage of their products, they probably wouldn't be able to exist and run as a business. And so not all companies need to be here, but for those that do, it's important to think about what data products you need to provide those defensible moats. So again, what do these stages all look like? Data informed, you're data driven, and you're data led. And it's perfectly fine for companies not to get to stage 3, but what's most important is to figure out which stage you are at and whether or not you have built up all of the right capabilities in a linear fashion. Some of these capabilities may be completed in different orders, but essentially I see these as almost linear building blocks that allow you to scale sustainably and effectively and efficiently to becoming potentially stage 3 companies. As you're going through this and maybe replaying it, you might come up with a couple of critiques or counterpoints. Like, my company actually provides data science services, and so I need to be stage 3. Well, then this presentation wasn't for you. If you understand data well enough, this is, not the right presentation for you, because it will literally be your core business model. Second, if you currently don't operate like this and you feel like you need to teach your entire organization how to leverage data, again, we need to slow down and think about who our first critical hire should be to start influencing the right data culture. We need to make sure that people are aligned on metrics, that people understand that decisions can be made with data, and find one place, one team to make that impact. And finally, people who think, I actually need all of these things before my business can grow. Well, it takes many years to build all of these foundations well. And so you have to start small. There are some points in time where in Gojek's history where we had to choose to sacrifice some of our data capabilities because they wouldn't be quite as impactful to the business today. And I'm glad that we made those trade-offs because it allowed us to grow and focus on the right things. Instead, I encourage people to zoom out and understand what matters about this framework. What's important is to match your capabilities with your business needs rather than trying to build all of these features and foundations just because someone on YouTube told you to. Second, nail the foundation. Work to understand what your business already has, whether or not you truly do have enough data, whether or not you are storing and tracking that data well, and use that as your strong foundation to build off of. And finally, translate, apply, and repeat. Not all of these strategies may apply to you. Different business models may require different types of foundations or have different strategic moats, but use this as a tool and figure out what's right for your product and for your business. I hope this was helpful. Thank you.